Welcome back to the third episode of the Let Love Begin podcast. Today we're talking about the role trust plays in our ability to love again. You know, if you're in an unhappy relationship or feeling like your partner's pulling away from you, maybe you're needy, you're suspicious, you feel controlling, you feel out of control, then this might be a great episode for you to have a listen to. Today, I'm talking with Kiri Honey, an educator, a business owner, wife and mother, and someone who's passionate about empowering mums specifically with the tools they need to have stronger relationships than they did before having kids. You know, kids can really throw a spanner into the works of our relationships with our significant other. And of course, everything in life has its challenges. So we're going to talk to Kiri about her story and how she began to rebuild her trust with her husband after his affair. So take a listen, see what you think. And of course, if something resonates with you, take it. If it doesn't, leave it alone. This is Let Love Begin, a podcast for the recovering brokenhearted, ready to heal and reclaim their enthusiasm. Welcome, Kiri. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Talia. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I am especially interested to talk about today's topic, which is the role trust plays in our ability to love again. And I'm especially interested in talking about it with you because you had a very maybe not so unique scenario in your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And you learned to trust again after that. And in fact, you mentioned that your relationship is now stronger after this. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what happened in your marriage?
Yeah. Okay. So it's now almost 4 years ago, because it was at the time that I was pregnant with my second child, that my husband ended up having an affair. The story behind that, and I found out 4 months after my son was born. So after the events had taken place. And obviously I was heartbroken, devastated. I didn't know how this could have happened. And it took a lot of work, a lot of soul searching, a lot of talking, a lot of everything, really, to try and make this work. But what I decided, and the bit that I really like to talk about, is that when I found out about the affair, I decided to take the kids with me and to leave. And I went and stayed with a friend. And my daughter was 2.5 at the time. And my son was a newborn. And so you can imagine that the chaos of that evening away was memorable in its own. And I had just been diagnosed with postnatal depression. So it was all very overwhelming. Nobody slept. There was lots of crying all night long. It was about 2 a.m. I called my husband and I said, "You need to come over here. We need to deal with this." And as I look back, the only real reason that I left was because that's what I thought we were supposed to do. So when you're confronted with something like this that shocks you to your core, you're supposed to leave. You're not supposed to accept that, But in the middle of the night, I was like, no. This is not what I want. We can fix this. So I was very determined that I was going to fix this. And I spent a lot of time through my own work. We did get therapy as a couple because we were very much in crisis mode.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got support on my own for both the depression and navigating this new trauma. And it was during that process that I really realized all the things that I was doing that led to this, because it wasn't just him. And there was a gap. There was a gap in our relationship, and somebody else was able to come in and take advantage of that gap, fill that gap, however you want to put it. Yeah. And so for us, it took time, but we now have, a stronger relationship than we've ever had.
Okay, so I have two questions for you. One is, how did you feel? Now, I feel like some listeners might be like, oh, that's an obvious question. But actually, I don't think it is, because you said you did something because of that's what I was supposed to do. So that's why I'm asking that question. And the second one was, what happened with the affair after you found out?
Okay. So the first part, I felt like I was shocked. I was overcome with emotion. I was like shaking. When my husband told me my daughter was actually at a play group with a friend. And so my son was at home asleep. I don't really remember what happened after that. I remember when he told me, and I was in shock. I didn't really know what I was feeling. I was just like, okay, well, I need some time, I guess.
And so he just came to you unprompted and told you?
Not exactly. He was blackmailed into telling me.
Okay.
So that's a whole other difference. That's a whole other story. But the second part of your question, like the affair had finished by the time he told me. So this was all working through past issues, things that had already been dealt with, kind of, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you called your husband over at 2 a.m., do you feel comfortable talking about what happened?
Sure.
Like, what realization did you have, if you can remember? Like, you mentioned you had the realization that, I left because I thought that's what I had to do. But then you realized, actually, no, what am I doing? So when he came over, obviously there was chaos and everyone was upset. But after there was a bit more calm, then what happened?
Well, basically, in the week before this all came out, he had actually started going to therapy. And it was because I had noticed in him that he was more angry, like there was something going on. And then this was the deal. He would go to therapy if I went to the doctor. And so I went to the doctor and realized that I was extremely depressed. And so I was able to say, you need to call your therapist. We are going to see them now. So he was able to call her, and she gave us some, I don't even remember what strategy, what she told us, but we were able to get in quickly anyway to be able to have our first session. And there was a lot of anger on his side to start with, and a lot of emotion because he was wrapped up in a lot of guilt and shame. And I was wrapped up in guilt and shame as well. Yeah.
How did you begin to rebuild? Like, you went to therapy, but what happened for you inside? Because for me, I mean, on our intro call, I said to you, I don't think that cheating on someone is the worst thing you can do. And I remember we connected on that front, and you were like, oh yeah, me either. And then this came out. So what happened in that moment when you realized this had happened, and then you said you realized your part in it? How did you begin to rebuild that trust with your partner?
So it came down to a lot of personal realizations. I know from the past, I'm pretty sure every relationship I've been in, there's been some sort of infidelity. So there was a lot of okay, so I'm the common denominator in there. What is it that I'm doing, that's leading to and it wasn't like a what's wrong with me kind of thing. It was only I can control my actions and my reactions. I have no control over what anyone else can do. But if I'm being honest, and if I'm being loving, and if I actually want to be around this person that I've, vowed to be around with, then there shouldn't be any gap for someone else to come in. Because on the other side, I know how easy it is for somebody else to come in because, they see a weakness. You say something, well, for my husband, he said something stupid. And it led to an unraveling of events. And because he was particularly vulnerable in the fact that I was miserable. I didn't feel like I wanted him around. It felt more like I needed him around. I needed him around to take the kids because I was going crazy, because I was only telling him about all the negative things. I wasn't sharing any of the great moments. It was just miserable. And so, and reflecting, like, do you really want to come home to that? Or will you probably try and escape and find something else? So it was through all that personal reflection that I was able to see all the things that I was doing. No, I didn't have the affair, but I definitely didn't make it very welcoming.
So these realizations, did they happen when you're with, like, in therapy with him?
Yeah.
Or?
They happened during the 2-year process that it really took us to come back to that stronger place. So it was in my own sessions with a counselor and with coaches, and the work that I did to really find myself and get confident in myself. And that's when it makes such a difference to the people around you. And then, he was on the same journey. So he was doing more stuff to find himself, because we had become, you just rely on each other too much. You get, there's so much pressure to make each other happy without first making ourselves happy. And that was where a lot of it came from.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about that, that even if you're married, somebody else is not responsible for your happiness. And, I think that's forgotten a lot. We think we get into a relationship and they're going to solve all our problems and we're going to be happily ever after all the time. And it just doesn't seem to really work that way, does it?
No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't.
Well, I really love this story, because you say now that your relationship is much more stronger than it was before.
So much stronger. And because we talked about all the hard things. That was not an easy thing, in particular for my husband, because I wanted to know everything.
Yes.
Because for me, in my head, it was actually way worse.
Right.
And so in knowing exactly what took, as hard as that was for him, because there was so much shame involved in how did I even let this happen? Once it's revealed, then you can actually see, okay, so I can see how that happened. I can actually understand that. I don't necessarily agree with, there's all that, but when you can actually understand and you can deal with those hard things and know that, I can deal with the hard. I pushed a baby out. I can deal with the hard things.
I love it. On your website, it says empowering mums with the tools they need to have a stronger relationship than they did before their kids. If someone doesn't have something like this to be a catalyst for that change, what would you recommend for people who might be in relationships like just before you found out about all this, where you are deeply or profoundly unhappy for whatever reason? What can we do to kind of take preventative steps?
First off is to get support. If you're not happy, get support, because you can be happy. You don't have to live in that. And man, after I started talking about this, I've been overwhelmed by how many people have similar, like just the depression side of it. I had no idea that so many of my friends had been dealing with it. I was like, why don't we talk about this?
Right. Yeah.
I am not afraid to say that I am still on medication. And part of me is like, okay, I shouldn't need medication anymore. But then the other's like, actually, it's working. So why would I stop?
Yeah, it changes lives. I literally have one friend in particular, and he's like, it changed my life. It changed my life. And I don't think, he goes, if I can stay on these forever, I will, because I'm a different person now. He was incredibly, profoundly unhappy, came from a really horrible childhood and just was miserable. You're not the first person who I've heard say that, like, they've just changed my life. I don't understand what the what such the huge bad part is. So many people have like, oh, I shouldn't take medications. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Because we should be able to do it on our own, because we shouldn't need support, because whatever. So we've forgotten about the fact that it takes a village.
Yeah.
And we're just like, we wear these badges of, the more like you struggle, the like more medals you get or something.
Except there is no medals, really.
Exactly.
It's just suffer in silence.
Exactly. And the reality is that we get one life, we get one opportunity. And why would you not do everything you can to make it fun and enjoyable and make sure you're laughing every day? And right?
Totally. So let's go back to trust. Like,
yep.
Obviously with your situation, that would have shattered a lot of trust with your husband. Mm-hmm. How did you begin to rebuild that? And and what part of you had to let go of something in order to do that?
So I'd actually had a lot of ongoing trust issues. And I was the type of person who did check phones. And although I hadn't felt a need for quite some time to do that, but I guess that's, in the overwhelm of life. And again, part of why it was so unexpected. And on that note, I actually remember my husband saying to me very early on in our relationship that if there was an affair, it would be over. Obviously, he didn't expect himself to be the one. And so when this came out, he was very much expecting it to be done. And that's probably why there was so much like that he wasn't able to share the details so like easily, because he thought it would make things worse. And on the trust fund, not the fund. So there was a lot of Snapchat. Snapchat is one of the problem areas in this particular situation. And so I definitely have a bit of a trigger around Snapchat. So there were a few like apps and programs that we had to be like, okay, we can't have this anymore. We obviously can't have any communication with this person. And fortunately for our situation, there was no interest there in continuing communication. We just had to leave things open for a while to prove that there wasn't anything going on. But the main thing here is not about checking phones and whatever. It's actually about your own confidence and remembering what I said before about if there's a gap, someone or something will be able to fill it. So the confidence in yourself, having your own passions, your own happiness, your own awareness of what you're doing makes things a lot easier to deal with. And then, because again, you have no control over somebody else. Mm-hmm. You can only communicate what you know, what you want, what you need. So in order for things to really have trust, you have to be sharing those things. And we talked about before, Talia, about having the hard conversations. Mm-hmm. And it's being able to have those hard conversations that helps with the trust, and knowing that the other person isn't going to leave because you say something that maybe hurts their feelings, or maybe they weren't expecting, or because for us, like that's the game changer. We have some pretty brutal conversations sometimes.
When you say brutal, what does that mean? Like just really painfully honest?
Yeah, painfully honest conversations. Yeah. And even just like a couple weeks ago, we had a bit of a row, if you will. And it was related to our upcoming like travel plans that we've got. And COVID related, that dreaded C word. But because I didn't 100% agree with his views, someone else, being my parents, their views were able to come in and get in the way. But because we've had so many of these conversations, him and I, because we are so aware of our triggers, of our views, of all the things, that we were like, oh, yeah, that's what happened. Because I wasn't fully on board with his view, there was another idea that came in and got in the way. And that was kind of a tangent, but
No, it's interesting because you're talking about the gap. I think a lot of people have that worry that they're gonna, like, someone's gonna tell their friends, and then they're gonna get a friend opinion coming into the gap and influencing the partner. And that does happen. Not gonna lie, some people, but I think it really comes down to the character of the person, and are they allowing themselves to be influenced? And I don't think it's a bad thing if they are. Like, sometimes you have people around you that you trust, and you trust their opinion. Now, is it always the right opinion for you? No one knows that except for you. But I don't think it's a bad thing to take on, or to let yourself be influenced by things that people who you trust and have a great track record say. Sometimes we need those reflections.
Yeah, well, again, it does come down to you and your own awareness and your own confidence. Of course,
And
if you
trust in
ask,
yourself.
everyone's got an opinion about something.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
you do
that's
have
right.
to be able to trust yourself and
Yeah.
and know what you want, what's important to you,
Yeah.
and your values and all that.
And also, as well, when someone comes into your relationship, like, who's not in the relationship and offers their opinion, they're not as invested. So they can say these flip it, throwaway things. And then sometimes it can really hit deep, and you're like, wait a second, but they're not in it. They're not part of it, I asked a girlfriend of mine, an opinion on something that was quite heavy the other day. And what I really loved about how she responded was she paused for a really long time before she answered. And then she said, I want to be really careful about how I say this, because I really love you, and I don't want to influence you negatively. And I don't know what kind of role this person's going to have in your life. So I don't want to say anything that could jeopardize our relationship later. And I thought, wow, what a considered answer. And this is what I mean when I talk about trusted friends. Like, the way that she answered that question was incredibly considered. It wasn't just like, oh, well, you should do this. Okay, so let's say, do you think that if you didn't have the catalyst of this affair as the kind of vehicle for moving these conversations forward, do you think that you and your husband would be in the same position you are today?
No, I really don't. I really don't. If we never confronted about, his anger and my depression, and we just kept going, well, things would have continued to get worse. We would possibly be divorced, because we wouldn't have the tools that we now know to say all the things that we've been afraid to say, because, like, we've been together like 14 years all up now. And so that first 10 years before the affair, we didn't say the things that we now say. We share so much more now. We are so much more confident as separate individuals as well as together. And we do what we can to support each other to have that time that we need separately, while also prioritizing time together and recognizing when we need those things.
And do you want to be around him now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to talk so much about how I just needed him. And then I switched it. I don't need you anymore. I want you.
Yeah. Yep.
And it changes so much. It really does. Really does.
How do you think, I think I asked you specifically before about you, but how do we begin to earn somebody's trust? Because I think that if we don't trust someone, it's very hard to relax around them, to really be who you are. I had a partner that I was like, I don't trust you to be able to hear what I'm saying. Like every time I say something you don't like, you say, I don't want to talk about it. And so I don't trust you to actually show up and be there and listen to me. And that creates a wall.
It does.
So how do we navigate that? What do we do in those kinds of scenarios?
So I would say the main thing is, well, we need to be able to have a hard conversation, but it's also, we need to know the why behind stuff. So if you can't trust someone to hear what you're saying, why is that a problem? So it's like, I need to be able to share this with you, because if you don't hear me, I can't
be myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to be myself around you. I want to trust you. I want to feel safe. In order for me to feel those things, I need you to, whatever those are. And that, again, it all comes back to ourselves, our personal awareness. And it's so important to ask ourselves these questions, because if you don't know, like, nobody else can give you the answers. Yeah.
I think that's a really important point of just that reflection. I can't speak for anyone else, but I know that sometimes I kind of forget to be with myself, like to spend that time reflecting. You know, it's like I have to put in a really concerted effort now, whereas back in the day when I had less responsibility, it would become more naturally. But I think when you have, you know, I don't have children, but when you have children or when you have a job or a certain type of high level responsibility, it's very easy for all that brain space to be taken up. So it's like you have to put aside time to just reflect and feel, otherwise you forget to reconnect with yourself.
And you forget to spend time with your partner. And I do, like, your relationship isn't like wet and forget. Like you don't just or spray and walk away.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can't just get married and then you're done. Like you don't have to do any more work. That's just not how it goes. And it's the same with ourselves, because if we just get on autopilot, we're like busy making lunches and folding washing, which is, you know, what moms do a lot of the time. And we just don't think about ourselves and the quality time that we need with us and our partners. And it's important to remember, for the moms that are listening, that if it wasn't for you and your partner, there would be no kids. So reflect on that and prioritize accordingly.
I think that's great advice. So we pulled a definition of trust from an psychologytoday.com article. I'm going to read it, and I'm just interested to hear what you think of this.
Okay.
Trust, or the belief that someone or something can be relied on to do what they say they will, is a key element of social relationships and a foundation for cooperation. It's critical for romantic relationships, friendships, interactions between strangers, and social groups on a large scale, and a lack of trust in such scenarios can come with serious consequences. Indeed, society as a whole would likely fail to function in the absence of trust.
I really like the piece about saying what you're, like, following through with what you say you're going to do. And that's a particularly big one when it comes to parenting, because how many times do we tell our kids that I'm going to do this, you know, like put your stuff away or you're not going to have this. And then we're like, oh, here's some lollies anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Or whatever it is, which, and this is a new, like, brain wave that I'm having right now. We don't really think about that much, how we affect trust with our kids when we do stuff like that. But this is the starting blocks of where trust issues come in. And again, it comes back to ourselves, because do you trust yourself to follow through with what you say you're going to do? Or how often are you saying things that you don't follow through on? And what are you expecting from your partners to do that maybe you wouldn't do? The expectations we set on ourselves and others is also really huge, and also something we need to try and avoid doing, to have better quality relationships.
I like to think about the the belief that someone can be relied on to do what they say they do. I feel like for me that's integrity. Like if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, you either do it or you get in integrity with the person who told you that you would do it. Do you know what I mean? The promise that you made. And I think the trust comes in when it's like, oh, that person's, like I was seeing a guy years ago. This is he immediately comes to mind. He was so incredibly out of integrity. Like he'd never do what he said he was going to do. He'd never, like if we said we were going to hang out, like he wouldn't call to hook anything up. But the thing is, and people might be listening and go, well, why don't you do that? And it's like, well, he's the one who set the date. So it's like, if you want to set the date, like I don't trust you to have integrity in that. And sometimes, so I think that those kinds of scenarios are like, are you in integrity or not? And then do I trust you to be in integrity and do what you say you're going to do? Or or let me know if you can't. Because that's also in integrity too. It's like, you say you're going to be somewhere and there's a train accident and you're like, hey, I was literally on my way, but there was a train accident, but I'm letting you know. Then, there's not much you can do about that.
Yeah.
You can you can stay in integrity and just let the person know. So
that's right. So again, it comes back to your own values and the way you view the world and the way that you want things to be around you. Because again, if you're a person of integrity, if you're a person with confidence and who trusts your own decisions, then there's a bit of like manifesting that happens in there as well. You will attract more of that. Whereas if you don't trust your own decisions, chances are you'll be attracting other people with trust issues as well.
I think you also won't let those people in your life. Like if someone's majorly out of integrity, they're probably not going to be in my life. Whether or not I'm attracting them, I'm not sure if that's it, but it's more, I'm not going to really let them be in my life.
Like again, because you're aware of these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's interesting. A friend of mine was telling me about her mother-in-law and she was telling me all the dilemmas that were happening. And she's like, what would you do? And I was like, well, it's tough because she's your mother-in-law, she's just not someone you can make a decision to not be part of your life. And she said, yeah, that's the thing, because normally when people behave like her, they're just out of my life. Like I just don't stand for that. But because she's my mother-in-law, I can't get away from her. Or I could, but it would, cause a lot of conflict in the family. So it's an interesting scenario. So she's like, so here, so then we were like, okay, well, here's your choices. Let's talk about what you can do with what you have, because sometimes there are relationships that we might not get so much choice. I mean, there's lots of choices, but I guess it depends which way you want to go with that. But anyway, this has been such a great conversation. Before we wrap up, do you have any words of advice to someone who is experiencing trust issues with let's since we've been pretty spouse heavy, let's talk about with their spouse.
Every situation is obviously a little bit different.
Of course.
It really starts with you. And so if you are in a place where you're struggling in your relationship, in your life, I would definitely start off with exploring some support and figuring out what's important to you, because you can only control yourself. You can only control your own actions and reactions. Nobody else can do any of that for you. And so that is where you need to start looking at your values, what's important to you, what do you want more of in your life and your relationship. And that's what it comes down to.
And any tips on trusting ourselves more?
Ooh.
Because that's where it starts, a good one. Right?
Yeah. So in terms of trusting yourself, I would say it comes more into knowing what you want. So it involves reflection. It involves looking back at what's been important to you in the past. What do you want more of? What do you want to this if you've got some negative patterns going on in your life, or you've been affected by some sort of trauma, which is all of us in some capacity, what is holding you back? And then get support to help you through it. So if it's a traumatic past, I would definitely go and see a therapist and get support that way. If you're looking for support in terms of growth and more what you want your future to look like, and you're ready to step out from the past, that's when you can see someone who's more of a coach and like the kind of thing that I do. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a bit about that. Tell us what you do and how you help people, and how we can get in touch with you if we'd like to find out more.
Okay, so I work specifically with moms, and like you said before, Talia, it's with moms who are looking to have a stronger relationship than they did before the kids, because we will spend time looking at how things were in your relationship in the past. But the reality is, if you've got kids, it's not going to be the same. But if you've had something before, you can have it again. We can't reinvent, or no, there's no magic wand work. But what I do is I work with moms, and we learn the tools and strategies so that you feel empowered and confident to enter your relationship. Also having the tools to address conflict, increase intimacy, and all that kind of good stuff, so that you can have more fun and have a great relationship.
So how do we find you?
So I have a website, kirihoney.com. And you can find me on there. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, just as my name, Kiri Honey. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kiri. I really appreciate you being here today. This has been awesome. And thank you for being so candid, sharing so much.
No worries, Talia. Thank you so much for having me.
This podcast is a Rebel Love production. To find the links mentioned in this episode, go to rebellove.com/letlovebegin. Amazing.